Hi, folks. We're here. That's Beth over there on the left. Kathy Andrews, the Unbroken Thread, right there under her logo. Yes. Kathy, thanks for doing this tonight. Welcome, everyone. Yep, right up there at the top. Yep, the Unbroken Thread, theunbrokenthread.com if you want to see Kathy's stuff, and you do want to see Kathy's stuff. That's just a directive. Yes, you want to see her stuff. So go there. Thanks, everybody. A couple of announcements, and then we're going to get underway. We want full time tonight. So next week, we were going to have Thread Talk with Kathy Ray, but I'm thinking we might start our holiday break early. So we'll probably just do a stitch and chat. I'll get in touch with Kathy, but we might just do a stitch and chat next Wednesday. And then this Sunday's show with Cindy Jackson will be our last new one. We'll have repeats until after the first of the year. And you do want to, and Beth will confirm this, you do want to catch this Sunday show with Cindy Jackson. There, even Kathy, yep.
Yeah, it was, she's fascinating. Fascinating woman.
Yeah, that's an hour. There was easily another hour and a half we could have done with her, easily.
Yeah.
And not been bored or touched any subject twice. Nope. She's a good one. So be sure and catch that. No drawing tonight. Now, the winners from last week were Donna Francis and Anne-Marie Makowski. And those didn't go in the mail till yesterday because the third winner was Barbara Renault. And I did not get an address from Barbara, and I've not heard from her, so we were waiting. And finally, we just mailed those two. So probably end of the week for you, Donna and Anne-Marie, to get yours. And Barbara, if I don't hear from you by tomorrow, I'm just going to put it back in the pile for another drawing. I sent you an email. Get in touch with me, Gary at wetalkfiber.com, and we'll get it to you. But otherwise, I'm just going to put the thing back in the hopper. So, okay, so tonight, maximum time here. And Kathy's going to tell you a little bit here in just a second about what we're going to look at and what she did. And after that, then she put together a video of her artwork. And so we're going to play that video, and it's a 6-minute video, and it's just music and the images going by. But yeah, it's powerful. So we're going to do that, and then we'll come back afterwards, and then we'll put each of the still pictures up, and then Kathy will take us through what was happening at those times and what she's showing in each of those, and whatever else she wants to share. You know, that's all whatever's in Kathy's head. But so Kathy will tell us what we're going to do. We'll watch a video, then we'll come back and go through those pictures. Please ask questions. Do not hesitate to ask questions. Kathy encourages questions. You know, that's what, you know, Beth will monitor things. So please ask questions as we go through the hour to learn what you want to learn. Kathy, I really applaud you for doing this. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. So with that, I'm just going to go ahead now and we'll play the movie, and then we'll come back. Oh, well, no, Kathy's going to talk to us. So Kathy, tell us what we're going to see, what you did, so on and so forth.
Okay. 3 years ago, almost to the day, I went for a mammogram and was diagnosed with breast cancer. Well, that's not true. They found something, and then a couple weeks later, my doctor called me in, and she told me I had cancer, which is sort of like getting all the air sucked out of your lungs. And starting right then, I had to learn how to cope with something that was happening to me over which I had no control, and cope in the moment. Then I had to obviously go through the treatment and then the healing process, which is not as straightforward as you would hope, but was easier than I was afraid of. And then later I had to process that because cancer just had never happened in my family ever anywhere. And so that was hard, the processing part. And those of you who saw anything that I put on social media, I wrote about embroidery for coping, for healing, and for processing. And those three different sort of stages when you have a unexpected traumatic event in your life are really important stages for your mental health, and also in the end for your physical health, because of course the two are tied together. So I'm not going to talk in great detail right now about what you're going to see. We can talk about that more. But the one thing I do want to say is this experience is certainly not confined to women who were diagnosed with breast cancer. It would also be appropriate and useful and all of that for somebody who's experienced an unexpected death of someone, or a different kind of cancer, or a car accident where they have a traumatic injury. And art, and particularly the art of stitch, can be something that helps everybody go through these kinds of events that, although we wish we could avoid in our lives, it's a rare person who gets through from birth to death without something. So that's my introduction.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Sure.
All right, let's make sure we got volumes where they belong here. Tell me something, Kathy. Sounded like you went quiet
Thank you
on.
for sharing. I appreciate that a lot. That's a hard piece to share in person because it's meant to be held and touched, and you can't let hundreds of people do that very well
Yeah.
because eventually it falls apart.
Yeah.
So, um, if one of the things that I wanted to talk about, you may have noticed in the video that the material, the fiber changed, the background material and the stitching material. And if you want to go ahead and share some photos, and Beth,
Okay.
if there are any questions or comments, feel free to interrupt. Okay.
Okay.
So when I was diagnosed, I was scared. And go ahead and go to the next one. And the first thing I did was I had this absolutely beautiful felted wool from a seller on Etsy, and I was just kind of taking all this in. And this was before we talked about treatment, before I had the MRI, before I had the biopsy. We just knew there was something wrong. And so I felt like, okay, I need to hold something and do something that's like a comfort blanket. And so I took this piece of felt, which was larger than the page in the book that I ended up making, and I just stitched an image of a healthy breast. And I thought, well, maybe this will bring down some good luck. My guardian angel will make sure that it's just a funny thing on the mammogram and it's no big deal. And then go ahead and switch, Gary. And then when other way. There you go. Oh, yeah, sorry, I got those. Yep, that's right. And then there you can see on the side, you can see that sort of sideways V. And that's where, when they do the biopsy, this rather large needle is it's mechanical and it's ejected into the place where they think the cancer is. And it wasn't so much painful as it was just scary. And there you can see that I'm starting to be suspicious that something's wrong. And the act of sitting down after whatever was happening at the clinic happened to me. And you go, whenever you're diagnosed with any serious disease,
Kathy,
you go through.
Kathy,
Yeah,
I'm gonna interrupt
yeah.
you. Get the microphone closer to you because I can't get enough volume out of you.
There, how's that? Is that
Oh, there
better?
we go. That helps a lot. Yes, thank you.
Okay. So whenever you go through any serious disease and you're in the hospital or in the clinic, wherever you are, and they're working on trying to figure out what's wrong with you, you have an awful lot of tests, and it doesn't feel, I mean, you feel human, and the medical staff was wonderful, but they really are looking at your body as an organism that they're trying to fix. And although they understand you're a human being and have emotions, that is some of the time of secondary concern. So stitching something where I could let those emotions take shape, where I could see them, not just talk about them or write about them, but hold them. That was really important. And if you go to the next slide, thank you. And here you can see this is after I've gotten the result of that something's wrong, and you can see that all the sort of flowers from the first page are gone, and now there's these very sharp gray and dark gray images of what I envisioned was disease. And of course, that's not what it looks like. And none of these started out like pages in a book. They were just flat pieces of felt. And then if you go to
I
the
have a
next
question
page,
for you,
oh,
Kathy.
sure.
Did you stitch these at clinic or when you got back?
No, not these first ones. I did not. That's a good question. No, I stitched them at home. Because these were things where I would go in and wait and have the procedure, have the mammogram, the biopsy, whatever, and then come home. So these first ones I did not. Later, yes, in the hospital, but not these.
Okay, and Kathy, sorry to keep doing this to you, but
That's all right.
apparently my sound was low and yours was fine, so you can sit back up and be a distance away.
Okay.
So yeah, so you can be comfortable. So okay,
Is that good now? I want to make sure people can hear.
yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I'm comfortable. You tell me what you need.
Okay.
Okay. If you go to the next page, thanks. And this page, this was a really important thing. And I think this is part of the coping process whenever something happens to you, is medically especially, there are all these words and terms thrown at you that you've probably never heard before, and you kind of have to understand what they mean. And particularly for breast cancer, there are certain treatments that are considered the right thing to do no matter what. But breast cancer has many different kinds, sort of disease, and there are sometimes options for what can be done or should be done. And sadly, or happily, I suppose, it's up to the patient. And although that's a good thing, that's also an overwhelming thing, because you have to learn these words that you just don't know. And you end up, when you are least able to concentrate, you have to, if you have to learn, you have to read stuff and understand. I think it would be unusual for a woman not to feel like she needed to have some understanding of what was going to happen, what her choices were. And so this page, this is the only page where I really didn't stitch. I put stuff on paper, I ripped it. I think I used some sort of like baking paper or something to put the ripped words on the page and the string over it, and because it was just so confusing. And this was a turning point for me, where at this point then I had to make a decision of what was I going to do. So
This Kathy, you can sit back up a little bit, but now
okay.
I assume at this stage that you it's hours and hours of reading and just trying to understand.
Yes.
You know, the worst place to look for medical information, the internet, but I'm sure it's just pour through anything to try and learn
Yeah.
what all these things are. And
Yeah. I think lots of women, I hope, have a place like I did, the Bliss Cancer Center here in Ames. And when my doctor walked in, and when she was going to give me the result of the biopsy, they don't call you on the phone, even if it's positive, I guess, because I had to make an appointment on the day I had the biopsy to see my doctor to get the results. And of course, at that point, they didn't know. So she walked in and she said, do you want me to just tell you? And I said, well, yes. Yeah, duh. And right then she handed me, and I pray this happens for every woman. She handed me a list and she said, you are going here next, and then here and here, and these are the people you're seeing. And suddenly you're sucked into this system where you meet with you meet with the oncologist who explains what can happen. I met with a cancer resource person who's called a cancer navigator, and her job is to help you understand the choices, answer all your questions, even the stupid, silly things that you think about. And she handed me a big book about breast cancer, really clearly produced by the American Cancer Society. And so even though you're doing all this research, hopefully you're also in a place where you have a team. And it's kind of weird to think about having a team, but that's important. They sent me to a nutritionist. The whole bit, to make sure that you as a patient do everything you can do to help get yourself better, that you're not just saying, okay, fine, do whatever you need to do to me. And you're right, that's the hardest. And my doctors all said, don't look at the internet. Well, of course you'll look at the internet. But they also said, here are the sites where you should look. And there are some really excellent sites run by reputable hospitals where they give you excellent information. So
And
anyway, go.
a frustration in that in many cases you didn't even know what questions to ask.
No kidding. I had no idea. And at first, my cancer they thought was quite localized. And then for a reason I can't remember. I shouldn't say I don't know, but I can't remember. The oncologist, I had spoken to the surgeon about having what's called a lumpectomy. So just to take out where they thought the cancer was. And then my oncologist said, hold off, I think we better do an MRI. And then they did the MRI, and then they found that the cancer was all over. And so taking out just a little bit of cancer where we thought it was, where they'd done the biopsy, that was no longer an option. And that was the worst day, because then all of a sudden I was facing something more serious than what I thought, and something more life-changing than what I thought. And that's another thing that happens, not just with cancer, but lots of things. You think, okay, this is the worst that it's going to be. Okay, I've coped with that. And then, boom, something else comes up to completely change the direction of where you thought it was going to go. And that's hard. That's really hard. And that's where doing something concrete, where you feel like, however ridiculous it is, putting these words on this piece of fabric made me feel more in control, because you sure don't. And you're
Right.
just
So
grasping.
how much time did you have between like when you got the diagnosis from your doctor till you had to make a decision about the mastectomy?
Wow. Let me think. I would say about 15 days,
Okay.
because the surgery happened in a month. They just were not going to wait any longer. They just said, no, we need to do this now, because my cancer had not, they didn't think it had spread, and it had not spread to the lymph nodes, and they wanted to get that diseased tissue out of my body.
Right.
So it happened fast to me. That was really fast.
Yeah.
But when you have something growing in you and that's the weirdest thing, is you can't control it. You can't, you can't sit there and say, stop growing. It doesn't work that way. But you want to. And it's kind of, other than being pregnant, the only time when you don't have control sort of over, you can try not to fall down and scratch your knee, but for the most part, you can take care of yourself, right? And make sure you don't have a disaster. At least you try. But cancer isn't like that. It just happens and you don't even see it. So,
Right.
you want to
Okay.
turn the
Right.
page?
Yep.
And okay, so this is when I realized that I was going to have a mastectomy. And the mastectomy in and of itself was scary, and it's not very much. It's not nice. There's no two ways about it. It's not a nice surgery, but no surgery is nice. Unfortunately, a mastectomy is a surgery where the result is really visible especially to the woman who's had it. And there are other kinds of cancer where you take out an organ, but it's inside your body, so you don't see it. You feel it, but you don't see it. And I found that really difficult. And for me, I had breastfed my children, and so there was that different kind of emotional attachment to how my body had been. So that was difficult.
Have Kathy one or both breasts removed?
I have only had one removed.
Okay.
So I have another mammogram on January 11th. I have them every 6 months, and every time I have one, I'm terrified for about 4 days beforehand. Sometimes I wish I'd had both done. There was no cancer on the other side, but if I'd had both done, then it would be over.
Yeah.
That we thought about that, but I thought, I just don't want to go through that. And I chose not to have reconstruction, partly because of my age. If I was really young, I might, partly because I'm not particularly full breasted. So I wear a prosthesis and it's not that uncomfortable. In fact, sometimes I forget I'm wearing it, so that's good. And partly because reconstruction can be, it's a pretty long process and it can hurt. And I just wasn't interested in hurting anymore, you
Yeah.
know. I don't
Mhm.
know.
Mhm.
You want to
Yeah.
turn the page there? Thanks. And this was fear. This was my fear. And the fear was the night before. The day of, the medical staff was extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. And the nursing staff and just everybody was so wonderful. And the chaplain came in and talked to me. And, it's amazing because you're not the only person to have gone through this by a long shot. And yet, once you are at that point, the nurses and the staff in the hospital, they understand that you're scared and what a big deal it is. And they are, at least here in Ames, Iowa, they were just right there for me. And of course, my husband too, and my daughters. My daughters couldn't both be here, but they communicated. So you want to turn the page again? Thanks. And then this just represents the surgery. And I used a piece of what's called punchinella, which is when they make sequins, it's the leftover metal. And I really don't know I can't tell you how they do a mastectomy because I've never seen one, but I imagined some sort of evil cutting tool.
Mm.
But to be honest, it, it wasn't as bad as I thought. So that was good. Go ahead and turn. Thanks. And then that's sort of how you feel about the scar, and you wear this huge bandage after your surgery that goes around your chest, sort of like a mummy, for a couple weeks. And then you go in to see your surgeon, who is obviously not your oncologist. It's the guy who did the surgery. And this particular doctor does mastectomies. That's one of the things he specializes in. And they unwind this bandage. So you have the nurse on one side and the surgeon on the other side, and they're unwinding this long bandage, just like a mummy. And that's probably the hardest thing of all, because then you are going to see how your body looks. And I was so scared, and I started to cry. And then they tell you to turn around and look in the mirror in the doctor's office, because looking down at your body is different from looking at it face on in a mirror. And I looked in the mirror, and my husband said it was just transformational. He said, "You got the biggest smile on your face." He said, "I didn't understand." And I said, "Well, it wasn't as bad as I imagined it would be." And all of a sudden, everything just sort of shifted. And it was like, okay, the worst thing that I could imagine happening to my body is over, and it's not that bad. I'm going to be okay. So you can turn the page again. And then these next two ones that are in blue are just sort of grieving, but gentle grieving, the loss of how my body was. And then you can tell, there's flowers there. And if you turn the page, the next one has a really pretty heart-shaped button kind of going away. Because although it was sad, there was also a part of me that was just so relieved when they said, "We got it all. There's nothing left. You're going to be okay. You have to take cancer medicine, but you're going to be okay."
So at this point, you're on the other side of the hill, and it's now
Right.
I've won, or I'm ahead of the game. I can beat this
Right.
thing. I can move on.
Yes, that's right. And if you turn the page again, this is that's the scar, and you can see that's the moving on, the new growth, the going forward. And then go one more page, and that's the last page. And that's me sort of representing how my body looks now. It looks different, but my husband told me, which was nice, I don't know, I assume he believed it, that he still loved me and it was still beautiful. But of course it does look different. And if you've never seen a chest of a woman who's had a mastectomy, the first time you see it, it's a shock. It is, because it's not what we're used to seeing. But the second and third time you go, "Oh, well, yeah, of course that's what it would look like." and then it's okay.
So a little process there of adjustment, but then
Yep,
a big driver behind that is that you have this out of your body, this disease, and no matter how you look, you don't have that hanging over you.
that's right. That's right. And my daughters had texted me throughout the whole time, and that's in the next segment of this piece. And yeah, there's the end. It's all bundled up. And the texting that my daughters did, I saved all those texts, of course, and then could print them out. But I realized in the course of the whole coping process of being diagnosed and making care decisions and having the surgery and then starting to heal, I realized what kind of a role model I could be for my children. I could choose to fall apart, or I could choose to say, thank God I'm alive today, and that cancer treatment gets better every day. But then, of course, you come up on the anniversary of your first diagnosis. Even though I went in every 3 months for checkups for the first year, for some reason that 1 year anniversary hits people hard. And that's when I had to start processing it. This sounds really funny, but when you have something like cancer, you kind of put yourself in this sort of special group. Oh, I'm a cancer person now. And pretty soon that kind of wears off, and you realize, well, I'm just a person who's had cancer. And then you have to start processing and incorporating what's happened to you as just another event in your life. It's not the event anymore. And that's when I made this piece, which is made of hand-dyed cotton and like canvas, and some sort of, I can't really describe what it is. You use it when you make costumes. It's almost plasticky. It's like batting for a quilt, but it's thick and really stiff. And everything about these pieces is very hard and very angry. And when I made this accordion book, I knew it was going to be an accordion book. The other piece I sewed together as little pillows with batting and made them into a book much later, much longer after the event. This was not a process piece. The first piece was a process piece. I was doing it to process what was happening to me. I was doing it without an idea of what it was going to look like in the end. This piece was, I am really cross that this has happened to me. I don't like it. This is a pain. The prosthesis is hot. It falls out of my bra when I'm gardening onto the ground. How embarrassing it did. I mean, like, seriously. And I was just so angry that I had to just deal with this, and having a mastectomy all the time, and or not a mastectomy, sorry, a mammogram, and they're uncomfortable. And I was just ticked off. And so I made this piece using machine embroidery. And if you've ever done machine embroidery, it's about as far away from hand embroidery as you can get in terms of volume. That machine goes ticka 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 ticka. It's angry. It can be an angry sound. So go ahead and flip. Unless, Beth, are there any questions right now?
No, there's not been any questions.
So
You worked on
go
this
ahead.
later, though. So this isn't, because
Yeah.
you worked on this after the fact. Okay.
So talk about
Right.
how the stitching during, the one we just looked at, how is that
yeah.
helping? How is that helping you? I mean,
Yeah.
it sounds to me like you went through all the grieving stages
Yes.
throughout this process. But then how did this help you?
Yeah, that's a good point, Gary. I should have touched on that more. There are a couple things. One, I chose, that wool. Every time I picked up a piece of that wool, it was like holding a baby blanket, and it was comforting just to hold it. And those pages in that first book, I did not do any of those in a hoop or in anything. I did those all in hand. And I don't normally stitch that way. And I also did all of it with wool. So the whole process of pulling this needle through this soft felted wool fabric and this beautiful wool thread, it was sort of like a comfort blanket Yeah,
Hmm.
it really was like a comfort blanket. And you saw that the colors changed, And as I felt better, the colors became brighter and clearer. And when I was frightened and not very happy, the colors, you could see that in the color. And all of that, yeah, especially that, yeah. That one. And go one more left. No, the other way. Sorry, Gary.
The other left.
One more. Yeah, sorry. There. That one is layers, and I actually slashed it to get the red to come through.
Hmm.
And that was after my surgery, and I had hand stitched, I'd layered these pieces of red flannel under the gray felt that you see on the blue felted wool page. And then I did. I machine stitched the incision shape and then took like a seam ripper and slashed it so that it frayed and opened up. And that just felt good to do that to something.
Hmm.
But the others, that was when I was angry. But the other ones, as you're drawing the needle through the thread, that gives you huge, really tons of time to think about what's happening and to try to identify how you feel, because you have these very strong feelings, but sometimes you can't even describe how you feel. It's just so out of your realm of experience that you don't know how to articulate what's happening inside your head. And of course, people around you can see that something's not right. And so doing that stitching, it was like I untangled my emotional knots as I stitched. Does that make sense?
Hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah.
Very much so. Yeah.
And making the teardrops on this piece, I remember this very well. I remember crying while I made this because I was so upset that I was going to have a mastectomy. That was going to be the main way of getting rid of the cancer. And it just helped. And it helped to how do I say, to visualize the disease, to
Hmm.
remind myself by making those angry gray stitches to say, Kathy, because sometimes I'd look at my body and think, but don't look sick. There's nothing wrong with me. There was no lump. I couldn't feel anything. There was no dimple. There was no discharge, nothing. And so putting the disease on the fabric with thread sort of made me grasp the reality of what was happening, because when you can't see something that's wrong, it's not so odd to think, is this true? This can't be true. They must be wrong. And so I had to kind of reinforce what the doctors were saying to me.
Mm.
So,
Yeah, I did notice that going through them, how as we went along, the colors got brighter, better. Um,
yeah,
yeah. Uh,
yeah, they do. I
And
remember when
and
I did
Kathy,
the last one. Yeah,
yeah, I was just going to say,
go ahead.
my son had cancer, and we always
Oh,
label
Beth,
things now before cancer and after
yes.
cancer. And there's just that
Yep.
there's that hard. In fact, we we always used to say we're going to have ice cream for breakfast December 19th. That was the day he was. I mean, I remember that day. I mean, it's never going to change.
Sure
That
you
day is
do.
engraved in your head, and it never goes. It just never
Never goes
goes
away.
away, I don't think.
No, I'm sorry, Beth. Is
Oh,
he
he's
disease
fine. Yeah, he's fine. He's working on his PhD. So yeah, he's doing fine. But you just never it just doesn't ever that date in your head never goes away.
That's right. Yeah. And it's cancer isn't the death sentence that it used to be. And when I saw my
Hmm.
oncologist in the summer, um, because you just have to see them for a long time after you're diagnosed, and which is smart, so they can keep track of and make sure nothing else is happening. But I talked to him and I asked him how he was. He said, I'm going to be honest. Every time I take a week vacation with my family, which of course he doesn't do that often, but he said, I come back and it takes me a month to catch up on the new research and treatment for cancer. He said that the field is moving so fast. And that's encouraging. I think that's great. So
It is great.
if I'd been diagnosed 100 years ago, hopeless, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So
Right.
that's pretty amazing to me.
Yeah, Inez, you're right. It's your yes, I am just a person who had cancer 18 years ago. Every year, the days before my next appointment, fear grips my soul. Yeah,
Yep,
it's there. That fear is always going to be there.
it is. You're always waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Mm-hmm.
Yep,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
happens. So the second piece is, as I said before, it's not so touchy-feely at all. You can go through these pretty fast, Gary, if you
Right.
want. And I had these beautiful buttons that I used that had belonged to my mom, and I really liked that. And I also hand dyed the fabric and used, of all things, I used old telephone wire that my dad has in his garage to hold them together. And partly I chose that because the texts on the back are from my cell phone. So it was kind of an inside joke between me and my daughters. But again, you can see the change in the colors as my diagnosis, as I'm reflecting on that. What I found interesting is this page, the one with words, there aren't so many words on it anymore. I didn't put all the words on it because what was important were just those few words in the end, because then I wasn't, I made the decisions, everything had happened. I wasn't overwhelmed anymore. I was just looking back and saying, yep, this is what happened and it's part of your life. So go ahead and keep going. Sorry.
So
Yeah,
do you
that was the,
you did machine stitch the whole thing then?
yep. Yeah. And that was interesting to do that because I had learned how to do that when I took my City and Guilds course. I had to do that. And I did lots of frayed thread. You can see there I added beads. And I was able to, how do I say this? Because I was trying to incorporate it, and I was for the first time allowing myself to be angry. Because when I went through the whole thing, I was mainly sad and scared. And then later, I was, why me? What did I do wrong? I never smoke. I eat right. Blah, blah. I wear sunscreen. Why did this happen? And, get angry. So you can see that.
Yeah.
That one especially. Yeah.
Now, so after the fact, when you're doing this, then this stitching and putting this together helps you burn that anger out, helps you.
Yep. Yeah. And it was, when something happens, you have to make sense of it and you have to incorporate it into sort of the narrative of your life. And up until that point, I was, Kathy Andrews, da 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 da. I had a life story. But part of that life story did not include cancer, and I did not think it would ever include cancer. Like I said, we've never had that in our family. I was not at high risk. And so for me to suddenly have to incorporate that kind of an event into where I thought my life was going to go, that was hard. It shouldn't be, but it was. It was, now I'm a cancer survivor. Well, I sure didn't want to have that on my resume of life. That was not the plan. But you have to do it. You have to say it wasn't the plan, but it's what happened. And then you say, okay, what was the good that came out of it? What was the bad? What really doesn't matter now? How has your life changed for the better or the worse? How have your values changed? And you have to incorporate that sort of. It's like a tapestry. If your life's tapestry only had bright colors in it and no black or dark gray, those bright colors wouldn't show up very well. And I don't wish bad luck or horrible things on anybody, but these are the kinds of things that for lots and lots of people make us stronger, more empathetic, wiser, able to see the world a little bit differently and maybe readjust where our values are.
Throughout this whole thing, I assume the people support uh, just so invaluable.
Yeah, yeah,
Doctors, nurses, therapists, counselors, obviously
everybody.
family. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think the hardest is that, and I would imagine this is true for any woman, is when you have breast cancer and you have daughters, that just adds another layer of fear, because you know that, research says if a family member has had breast cancer, you're more likely to get it. It doesn't mean you will, but there's a slight increase in your risk, and it depends on what kind. So that, for me, because I have two daughters, I don't have sons, that was sort of an extra layer of concern after it was finished. While it was going on, I really, maybe I was selfish, but I really didn't think about that. That was not my first priority. But after I was sort of in the clear for a year or so and I started to do this, that's when I started to think about, and actually my daughters started to think about, because initially they weren't scared for themselves. They thought their mom might die. And my cancer wasn't that serious, but that's the first thing. Cancer does that to people. It messes with
Right.
your head. And then later I got to thinking about, wow, this is hard for my kids, for my daughters. Now they have to say, when they go in for a checkup and they say, do you have any history of cancer in your family? They have to say yes. And
Yeah.
before they could say no. And
Yeah.
that was different. And they were absolutely so supportive. My daughter in California just couldn't come back. She came back after my surgery, and in fact went with me when I had my fitting for my prosthesis, and she was amazing to come with me. I didn't want to take my husband, but I didn't want to go alone. And she was fantastic. And then my other daughter, who lives in Minneapolis, she came down on the day I was meeting with the doctor. Go ahead and go forward, Gare. And one more. Yeah, and these are the texts that they sent, which I printed out. And Dee Dee's my granddaughter, and I like that she's reading her girl power book, because Meredith, this was on the day that I had the appointment with my doctor. Yeah, December 6th. You can keep going. And she says, just got in the car. You don't have to call if you don't want to when you get your results. But I didn't. I waited until she got here to our house to tell her, because I didn't want to tell her when she was on the road, and that must have been really a long drive for her. It's only 3 hours from Minneapolis, but still, to drive and not know, is my mom finding out she has cancer, or is my mom finding out she doesn't? And then after that,
Right.
they were just super supportive.
Yeah.
That really
There's
stick.
something about having
Oh, go ahead.
family with you when you're going through. My sisters came, and one came and helped take notes. We were and Sam had radiation, and she
Oh,
goes, "You're
I'm
not
sorry.
taking notes." Yeah, so it was just part of his cancer treatment. He needed radiation. So she came and she stayed with me a week while Sam and I were in the hospital, and took notes and just helped take care of us. And
Mm,
family, there's something about just having someone there to support you when you're
yeah,
going through something so horrible.
I agree.
But
And for me, keeping track of that support somehow. I don't know if you kept those notes or not. And it is hard, you're right, to listen to everything the doctor's saying. But I've started now, when somebody sends me an email that says something positive, or I get a card, or, like these texts, I stick them in a big box so that I remember that there's this net of people who care, and that I'm part of
mhm.
that community and that net, because that's important. You're right. Gary, what were you going to say?
It'll come to me.
Okay.
It slipped away. It'll come back. It's all right.
Go ahead and turn the page. Um, yeah, keep going. This is about the MRI. Um,
Oh, I remember what it was early on when you said that they don't give you a diagnosis over the phone, that they want you
yeah,
to come in good or bad. And now through this whole thing, the direct connection person to person is coming to me through this whole thing, where people aren't hiding behind a keyboard, that
no,
they're with you.
Mhm.
yeah, yeah, they are. And I have to say, I was shocked after Dr. Basner said, "Well, you have cancer," and I'm sitting there on the exam table, and I really can't hear what she's saying. I see her lips moving, but I'm flipping out. I mean, silently. And my husband's able to focus, of course, better than I am. And suddenly like I said, she hands me this piece of paper that says, okay, in half an hour, you're going to go meet the oncologist, and then you're going to go meet your cancer navigator. And on Tuesday, you're going to the da da da. And it's like all of a sudden, there are all these people you've never met who appear to have only your health at heart. Now, granted, they have tons of patients, but that's not how they act. They act like
Mhm.
it's all about you, and it was extraordinary.
Hmm.
That was a real positive of the whole thing, was to see that side of the medical establishment. That
And it
that
must
was
have been, in a weird way, a comfort to have that plan laid out so that you see a path.
Yep. It was it was like I could let go and I didn't have to be in control. I had to understand things and learn stuff and make some decisions, but I could also say, okay, they know what they're doing, obviously.
Yeah.
And that was great. Can you flip
Yep.
the pages again for me one more time? Strong and brave. Nope, keep going. One more time. I'm trying to find. Oh, this one. No, go back. There was a point you can see. You're right. Poor choice of words, Mama. You're not deformed, and that was where I was having a bad day, and I told my daughter I felt deformed, and she said, "No, you beat cancer." But then it's the last sentence that cracks me up. Though I'm glad for you, it's winter, and you can wear scarves and not feel silly about it, because when you first have a mastectomy, you can't wear a prosthesis. It hurts, so you don't look right when you wear clothes. And so, of course, one of the things you want to do is wear a scarf. And I distinctly remember the first time I went out in public after my surgery, before I got my prosthesis, and I was so self conscious. And of course, nobody looks,
Yeah.
get
Right.
serious.
Right.
And, and it was so funny that my daughter says, "Yeah, it's winter, so you can wear scarves," and to laugh.
Yeah, I
So,
suppose that's a weird thing as you go through
yeah,
the days, in that you are so conscious of it, and 98% of the people don't even give you a glance. They
nope,
just, yeah. And
right.
so what's driving you nuts is not even on their radar. And yeah,
That's right. Yeah.
yeah,
And I dare say that's probably true for most things that happen to people. People are very self-conscious about when their body gets damaged or changes. And I think for the most part, human beings really, we don't look that closely. We look at someone's face and we connect with them in their eyes. We're not looking at other stuff. But boy, I was certainly self-conscious at first. Not so much now. Don't care. You want to turn the page? Turn the page again. No, that's getting well. We love you. Keep going. And this is my favorite. It says AI, but it should say, "I love you so, so, so much. That is all." And that's really what it's about, is if you're lucky, when something traumatic happens, you realize how loved you are, whether it's cancer or the death of somebody or a car accident or whatever is just knocks you for a loop, that all of a sudden you realize, wow, what's important is that I'm loved, and I love people. And
Mhm.
That's what's the key. So, and it did help to process, to do all this. And I still think that for me, when I have a rough day or I'm feeling, I don't know, for whatever reason down, sitting down with a needle and thread always helps. When I was in Akron about a month and a half ago, I asked all the women who I was teaching. It was a group of 22 for one class. I said, "What motivates you to stitch?" And almost everybody said, "It's cheaper than therapy. It keeps me calm. It helps me focus." And there have been tons of research studies about textile art and healing. And of all the, one of the studies I read, of all the kinds of art that people do, whether they're in hospice because they're terminally ill or they're recovering from cancer or mental health issues, they have found that textiles have the greatest impact because they're the things that we can hold in our hand and the things we carry forward from our childhood, from blankets and mom's apron or the feel of dad's sweater when you cuddled with him. And I thought that was really interesting. I wouldn't have guessed that. But once I read it, I thought, well, yeah, that makes sense. Textiles are omnipresent in our life. And of course, working textiles is going to bring us this sense of peace and calm because textiles are so emotive. They carry so much in them. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
This is going to be weird, but I'm going to try. As a mother and wife and so on, you're brought up and trained, if that's the right word, to always be in control, always have the answers, on and on and on. And I mean, I can't relate to that, but I see it every day with my wife and and our daughter, and you just always have to be in control. And here's a time when you literally lose control. Are you a different person now today in that you're more comfortable not having control and not being the person with all the answers, or do you go back to that? If that makes any sense. I don't know.
That makes perfect sense. You're awfully perceptive. The more I hear you talk, when you were talking to Trisha, I thought, wow, he's perceptive about this. The answer is yes. And not only did I grow up that way, but my mother was mega organized and my father is an engineer. So
Oops.
yeah, the idea was
Beth
to
relates.
be, yeah, to be organized. And I remember being a young mother and feeling like I had one of those giant stoves that has like 8, what do you call it? Rings to put pots on, 8 burners. That's the word. I couldn't think of it. And that my job was to make sure all 8 pots didn't boil over at once. And there was no way I could do it no matter how fast I worked. And now I don't care if they all boil over and they boil dry. I'm just going to stand there with a glass of wine or a cup of coffee and watch. And that isn't to say I don't like to have control, because there are some places where I really do, especially when it comes to my teaching. I want to make sure everything's right. But that's because I was a teacher my whole life. That's just how I am. But I can tell you that my bed is not made today. Steve and I got up this morning. I said, I don't want to make the bed. He said, okay. And I would never have done that before. Never. And we eat dinner in front of the TV, and I would have thought that was just a bad plan. And now I love to watch TV, so I just do. And I find that I make choices that make life easier and that are things that make me happy instead of things I should do. And I have no tolerance for people who are old grumpy curmudgeons and who only see everything in life as being terrible. I just have no tolerance for that. I don't talk to me, go, and I just leave. I don't want to be around those people because life is magical. We are so lucky to be alive every single day. And if you feel like it's and I feel sorry for people who have mental health issues that put them in that place. But there are a lot of people who would prefer to complain, and there's mentally they're fine. They just think it's cool to be a complainer. The more they complain, the stronger they are, because obviously they're dealing with a very difficult life, and you should admire them. No, I don't have much time for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd rather just be happy. It's easier. Did that answer your question?
Yes. So ugly process to go through, but freeing in a way after the fact.
Oh, absolutely, Gary. But I think that's true for lots of processes. There are lots of things that happen to people, and when it's all over, they look back and say, wow, this is what good came out of that.
Yeah.
Would I wish this on my worst enemy? No, but I can see that there was good that came out of this. And
Right.
and I think if you could see that, how lucky, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Yeah.
It's all part of growing.
Yep.
And it's interesting. You were talking about stitching. That was when my son Sam learned how to stitch. He really wanted to stitch, and he would do a little with me beforehand. But we had tons of time in the hospital, so he learned to do hardanger. He did some canvas work. He beaded. That's what he really learned to do. He really grew in his beading work, and I think it was good for him because it gave him something physical to do, because we had 3 years of it. I mean,
Oh,
children,
gee.
that was 3 years of treatment. So we had a long haul. And so when you have that tactile stuff that you can do with your hands, something you can work on, I don't know, it's comforting. It brings you joy. It gave him something to talk to people about too. People would come in and say, well, what are you working on? Well, I'm beating this lizard, or whatever he was doing at the time. But
That's great.
it gave him something to, because kind of as a kid, sometimes they don't want to. My kids were kind of shy, so they just really didn't always want to talk to people. And so,
Mm-hmm.
but
Yeah.
having that tactile hobby of stitching and working on things I think it's just so important to,
And something in your
you know.
hand, like you say, that
Mhm,
tactile thing. Agree.
Yeah.
I'm
mhm.
curious, if have you ever asked him when he looks at those
I'm
things,
going to put you guys
does
on
it,
screen.
okay, thank you. When he looks at those things, does it take him back to the time when that happened in his head? Does he remember?
Well, he remembers. In fact, he when the COVID vaccines first came out, he was doing his own research on getting them, because they said, well, if you've had cancer and you had a bad reaction to this medicine, please don't
Mm,
take the shot. And he was like, and then it just brought back memories. We had a really bad day, where he almost died
oh, I
on us
bet.
from one of the medicines. And so when you have that, it's, he hasn't really said if the needlework has done that, but I know he has, memories of things
Mm,
happening then,
yeah.
for
When
sure.
I
All my kids
hold when
do.
I
It changed
hold
them all.
the book, yeah, when I hold that felt book, it just takes me right back. It's like I'm in the place where whatever room in the house I was stitching in, I'm there again. But I think that's a
Mhm.
good thing for me. That's a good thing.
So
Right.
it
So,
still serves a purpose today.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I have to say I wish I would have brought the felt one to Chicago. Although that I couldn't have, because that one is meant to be held and meant to have the pages turned and to feel it. It's a really, and to touch it, it's really tactile. Sometime I'll have to bring it for you to touch, because it's not meant to be a piece that you just look at.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and it would be better, honestly, if hundreds of people looked at it and it got worn out, if it helped people.
Mm-hmm.
That would be the better thing. So
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
you're welcome.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for
Thank
Are
you.
you
Thank
sharing.
you. Thank you.
My pleasure. And just one last thing for all the women who are listening, I know they're not comfortable. They're more comfortable than they used to be. The machines are much nicer. Please get your mammograms. Please. It's so easy to do. And if they catch it early, they can do so much so quickly before it becomes life-threatening. I know they're not fun. I know. Just
Yeah.
do it.
Just do it. Just
Yeah.
do it.
All right. We're going to end it
Thank-
here. Kathy, thank you so much. Just applaud
Thank
you
you,
for
Gary.
spending an hour doing this.
Well, thank you. You're the
Really
best
appreciate
guy.
it. All right. Thanks
All
to
right.
everybody. We'll be back next Wednesday. Appreciate you joining us. And yeah, share this thing. There's people
Yeah.
out there that this will help. So
I
please
hope
share it.
so.
All right. Thanks,
Okay.
everybody. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.